Hi, everyone. I am so excited today to be talking with Jen Locke, who is the CEO of Crimson Wine Group. You might not know that name, but you probably know their very famous brands, including Pine Ridge, Sagazio, Chamisal, Archery Summit, of course, in Oregon. You're really specialists in California, Oregon, and Washington, that whole wonderful Pacific Northwest corridor. Or I guess California is not Pacific Northwest, but we'll just say that Western corridor. So, Jen, I want to begin by asking you about how you think people could overcome, in a sense, confusion about wine. I was at a wine market council meeting recently, and they were talking about how intimidating it is when a young wine drinker stares up at 400 labels that they don't know, have no experience with the wine inside. What do you say to people who say, I'm just overwhelmed, I don't know what to do in a situation like that?
It's totally fair. And quite frankly, even after all these years being in the industry, I'm overwhelmed on occasion. The one thing I love about this industry is that it is a place for continuous learners because, every 6 months there's a new vintage somewhere in the world being brought to market, which gives an opportunity for new wines to end up on the shelf, right? And so it can be incredibly intimidating. I think going in with curiosity is first and foremost, and knowing that there's no right or wrong answer. And the truth of the matter is, we need the on premise. I think we need to work with the on premise and more strategically figuring out how wine by the glass becomes a better value proposition and served in maybe a more meaningful way. And then, and also, go talk to your local bottle shop. You don't have to, you can buy wine in grocery, but like if you have a place in your community, thankfully most large urban areas still have like wine shops and people who do it out of the love of it. And most great bottle shops will have plenty of time to help you sort of deduce into, what you like to eat, what you like to drink. And then another really great way is if you do have a wine that you like, is to join their club or to engage with them and ask them like, hey, I like this wine. I may not know why I like it. Can you help me articulate what the attributes are of, maybe I like more of a fruity Sauvignon Blanc or whatever it may be. Then at least when you go in, you can say, hey, I tend to like lower tannin wines, or I know that I like higher tannin wines, even if you don't necessarily the specifics. And certainly by the time you get into a global lens, even just for understanding the varietal nuances, or it's intimidating. I think it's one of the things that makes the wine industry so magical, but it's definitely still a barrier of entry.
Yeah, I wonder myself if we don't emphasize the meaningfulness and the excitement of discovery enough, though, because
Mm-hmm.
when people have asked me that question, I always picture like a 4-year-old kid looking up at the Baskin Robbins board of ice cream,
Right.
right? There was a moment when you didn't know what pistachio tasted like, or
Yeah.
mango, or black raspberry, or whatever, but you thought, how bad can it be? I mean, in the worst case scenario, I'll just order a different ice cream cone. I mean, that that kind of discovery is, I think, is joyful. Now, people might say, well, an ice cream cone costs $3, and
Yeah.
it's hard to have that sense of discovery when you're spending $30 or $50. But maybe that's where discovery with other people comes in,
Mm-hmm.
right? Where everybody's bringing some bottle of wine to be discovered, and you're sort of sharing the costs of those. And this is, after all, Share and Pair Sunday season. Thank you, by the way, for Crimson's being part of our supporters. We're very grateful for that. Where did your own passion for wine come from?
Wow, that's a good question. I before I forget, I have to tell you this last I play a lot of tennis, and this last Sunday, it was Easter, but we had to play tennis anyway, and we did a share and pair champagne tasting. So all of everyone from tennis brought a bottle of champagne, and we laid them all out. And after tennis, we did from like a demi-sec all the way to, and it was a hoot, like no one was in it for more than $40. We were there for maybe an hour. We still got to go home and do our family duties, but like that's the thing I love about wine. That's the thing I love about the community that it can bring together. Like it was more about exploration and just again that community than anything else. So I grew up in the restaurant business. My grandmother had a catering company. So we were child labor in her kitchen, peeling apples and making tea sandwiches. And school, I loved the social aspects of school, but school wasn't necessarily where I filled my cup. And I was really lucky when I was, I was lucky at the time. My mom and dad basically told me I had to get a job, a summer job. So I started bussing tables at Ray's Boathouse in Seattle when I was 16 years old. And our somm at the time was a gentleman by the name of Jeff Prather. And we had a lot of the Washington State wines. We were the top Washington wine account at that time in the late 80s, early 90s. And I fell in love with it through service, through that, watching what opening bottles of wine would do to people's experiences. Like, they'd be on the deck having a thing of manila clams, and I'd open a bottle of, Tualatin Chardonnay, doesn't even exist anymore, or like even Argyle, or we were so provincial in the Northwest. And I would just watch what would happen when I'd open a bottle of wine. Like, the experience elevates. And unless you work in the restaurant industry, you can really see it happen, unfold in real time. And I, even though I wasn't old enough to drink, I was attuned enough to say, like, wow, these guests that are having bottles of wine together are having a more meaningful meal than the people that are not. And I was really lucky. We had an extensive wine program, obviously based in the Northwest. And then I moved on to a larger company that had restaurants all around the country. And I did restaurant openings, and I became a beverage director there. And similarly, like, I just, like this moment, I remember my first time coming to Napa Valley, especially being from Seattle, I was just like, this is the most magical place on the planet. Like, why would anyone? And I remember my mom telling me, she's like, you're gonna live in Napa one day. And I'm like, oh, how am I gonna end up in Napa? I'm in the restaurant business. And fast forward 10 years, I've been here now for 20. So yeah, so you never know. But it is our founder of our company says, like, wine is love and laughter in a bottle. And I think that sounds so cliche, except, and I know you see this too, it's like your most fond memories of drinking wine usually are not, maybe it's the wine, but that's only one component of it, right? It's like, I was with these really great people. I was in this really great place. The food was awesome. Like, it just, all the things, it just kind of, I think it just takes special moments to a higher level, which can't think of many other beverages that do that. And it also creates a shared language and a shared experience that is super unique. And if you haven't experienced it, it's hard to really understand. But that's, to your point on exploration, like, keep trying. Like, you will find your moment will happen. And when it happens, you're gonna be like, oh, now I get it. And then you're hooked, and then the rest is history.
I sometimes call that the kind of when Harry met Sally moment, like, what she's having, right? When you watch other people having this great, not only this great experience with wine, but as you say, this larger, fabulous experience with each other. It's, I was thinking about actually Pope Francis, who passed away a couple of days ago, and on Easter, actually. And, there's a quote by him, and I think it's something like, can you imagine, the apostles drinking a cup of tea at the Last Supper? I mean, that would have been unthinkable. That wine is so connected to the heart and to people coming together in the spirit of generosity. And it's a very enriching, even if you can't articulate it, it's a very enriching experience. which is as needed today as it's
Oh,
ever been.
you took the words right out of my mouth. We've never been in a time when we've needed more of a shared language and a shared purpose and a sense of community.
Mhm.
And that's why I love this program so much because it's just an invitation to, you know, invite some people over, like have a conversation, slow down for a minute, and yeah, it's a difficult time for people. I think people feel isolated and somewhat scared, and there's been a lot of, to your point, thousands and thousands and thousands of years. Some of the biggest problems that our societies have ever faced in our lives have been solved over a glass of wine. So we might be well advised to continue that legacy.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's an often overlooked part of wine in an effort to, I'm tasting your Chamissal
Oh,
Pinot right now
thank you.
from San Luis Obispo. This is the 2023. And I hope that I'm not too guilty of this myself as a writer. When you're trying to put wine into words, you're tunneled down into, is this strawberry or is this black cherry or whatever, right? And sometimes you have to remind yourself to lift up and see this wine as a way that people can come together, a
Mhm.
way of uniting us. And that has social good. I'm convinced that moderate wine consumption has
Oh,
plays a beneficial role in society.
well, it's really about the table, right? It's about it's, I think about, I have a couple grandchildren, and every Sunday, we watch my grandson Sunday night, and I always make a home cooked meal, and we always sit down at the table. And his parents are both working, like the whole thing, and they don't always sit down at the dining room table, but they know it. He knows at our house, we set the table, we help set the table, we sit down, we have dinner, and it's that moment where we don't have our phones. We're just together. He's 5, so like my husband and I will have a glass of wine. He's having, water or whatever. But, we do our little rose and thorn game or whatever it is. And it's his chance to, like, we talk about the food, we talk about the day, we talk about the week, and it's this precious, precious time. And I do think that, more and more that people live on their phones and they live independently, and they all this idea of the shared table is so critical. When COVID happened, I wish that I had the fortitude to really write a paper on the impact that, like, the on restaurants have in communities,
Mhm.
like the social fiber that a strong restaurant community, to me, is absolutely an indication of how strong your community sort of fabric and ecosystem is in many ways. Because I wouldn't be where I am today without it. You think about it, it's a trade. People can work their way up. It's a soft landing for people that maybe be in transition. And it's also a very legitimate and rewarding profession if you choose to be that. And so I think about, the cost of dining out, and are people, so if they're not dining out and that was the time that they had a shared table, are they making sure that they're doing that at home? Those are some of the bigger things that I kind of want. Oh my gosh, I hope, like, I get why it's expensive. People don't have as much cash as they've had, inflation, whatever. But then, like, don't walk away from having a proper meal and a bottle of wine just because you're not out at your local restaurant. Make sure that you're picking one day a week, that you do that at home, where you invite your friends over, or you just have a proper family dinner. It doesn't
Yeah.
even have to be fancy. That kind of trend worries me a little bit. Is as much as it is about wine consumption growing or falling, right? It's about that connectivity.
I absolutely agree. And I think, when I think back to COVID, I think food and wine sort of saved me in a sense,
Oh,
right? I mean, it was not that hard to have a Zoom, You were having, a glass of wine, maybe chopping the carrots at the same time,
Mhm.
cooking and as best you could, being with someone else or being in your bubble with just your friends who you
Mhm.
had agreed to be with. But for me, it reminded me uh, of nature. In fact, today I was thinking, it's almost going to be Earth Day here coming up.
Yeah.
And I was thinking about also Mother's Day, and that we should be celebrating the greatest mother of all, Mother
Or,
Nature.
yeah.
And what beverage other than wine is, or more than wine, is supportive, or it is the epitome of Mother Nature, right? Wine, so connected to the earth, to the ground, to its place. It's absolutely the voice of nature. And so even during those difficult COVID years, I felt like I had this connection still to people through wine and to nature through wine.
Yeah. No, I understand. And I think that that's one of the things from a consumer perspective too, that you're going back to your first comment on the amount of choice there is in the wine segment. It can become overwhelming. And I think that fine wine is defined by wine that's made with intent or a purpose, right? Not necessarily price point or of a provenance, meaning like, to your point, a linkage to a place. Um, has to figure out how we do a better job of telling that to people. Because when I look at all of the health trends and all the, and all the things that consumers really are gravitating towards, you're right, fine wine is the answer. Moderate fine wine is the answer. It's low input, it's sustainable, it's good for the environment. That we don't add bad stuff into it. It's grapes and yeast and like, you know what I mean? Like there's a few things that get added in, but they're naturally occurring. And I look at some of the other like RTDs growing or some of the other cross categories. It's like, what are you putting in your body? And like as far as a sustainable perspective, like where is that stuff being manufactured and grown? And to your point, like, I mean, I'm literally at Pine Ridge right now looking out my window at the vineyard that is in my glass. Like I'm like, it doesn't become more connected than that.
I know, the other day I read that margarita mix, when you make a margarita with mix, that mix to make one margarita is equal in sugar to 3 slices of cake.
Oh my God.
And it's
Yeah.
always curious to me when
Mhm.
people, I mean, I occasionally like a good cocktail too, but when people talk about wanting to be close to something artisanal and
Mhm.
true and eco-friendly, and that is not tequila, that is wine.
No.
Sorry,
Yeah.
tequila, right?
Mhm.
But wine really answers those kinds of environmental longings, perhaps more than any other beverage. Maybe you could argue tea does that a little bit too, but um, yeah, and I hope we can continue to tell that story louder
Yeah.
and better, because it is an essentially good and true story. Um, I feel like some days I feel like the woman defender of wine.
Yeah.
But
Thank
but
God for you, though. We need you. Appreciate you out there carrying the torch and telling the stories and advocating. And I do think it's just about, to your point, it's in this day and age, it's really hard to get that message across for whatever reason. We seem to have easier ways to communicate than ever before. Part of it is as an industry, we're not necessarily galvanized in what we want that message to be.
mm,
Um, and yeah, and not everybody can get on a plane and come out to wine country.
yeah.
Or they even consider it as an option. I mean, start there. So
Although there are more than 10,000 wineries in the US right now, and sometimes even visiting a humble little
mhm.
winery, not in one of the major states, but it almost I understand from from talking to people around the country who own little small wineries around the country, that after a visit, people come away with a whole different feeling about wine
Oh,
because
100%.
yes, you see it in action, and you see
Mhm.
the humility really of everyone who works in a winery. They are very conscious of this cycle of life that they're participating in, and humility in the face of agriculture and nature. It's hard not to be moved by that. So even if you can't come to California or Washington or Oregon or New York
Right.
State, there are little wineries all over.
Everywhere. Everywhere. I just went to Texas Hill Country for the first time
Yes.
last year. Yeah, like I agree. When you're listening to this, I promise you, I think every state pretty much has wine, or somewhere you can find one. I agree. Start there. Yeah, start there. Go just listen to there's no doubt that whoever is running those wineries is incredibly passionate. Yeah, it's a good
Yeah.
point. It's a very
Yeah.
good point.
So Jen, because it is share and pair season, tell me a favorite food and wine pairing that you have.
Well, I asked my husband this question last night because I thought you might ask it, and he's like, "You have to pick one wine to pair."
You married the
And
right guy.
yeah, well, yeah, we have more wine than we probably know what to do with. We're on the opposite side of that spectrum because we just love it, and it's hard, It's like, oh, we but we from a food and wine event annually in my house would be Thanksgiving. Like Thanksgiving is my husband loves to prepare it. We do turkeys two different ways. We do two different stuffings. We do like Indian spiced yams. And we start with vintage champagne and currant champagne. And we go through, aromatic whites into Pinots and Gamay and all that stuff. Like it's our Super Bowl, I guess would be the way to put it, right? Like it is, if just pure to the point of like experimenting, having 5 stems in front of you, not to drink a lot, but just like all the different flavors on your plate. Like it's one of those meals that you could really. So I would say Thanksgiving we probably put the most thought into as far as like what are we going to be putting on the table. As far as signature dishes and things like, because my grandmother was a caterer, so I grew up at her house, and she, like she was Catholic, so our meals were very much centered around like kind of the traditional Christian holidays, and Easter just happened, so it's I guess friend of mine, but we always would have rack of lamb or leg of lamb, depending on how many people were coming and what she could afford. And this last week I did her rack of lamb recipe with some of the Archery Summit Pinot Noir. And it's such a classic. Like it's not, it's just delicious. And some, sweet baby carrots and lots of salt and pepper on the lamb and rosemary and garlic. And it just the wine in particular I picked was Red Hills, and it's a little bit warmer site. So it's got a fair amount of fruit, and it just yum. But my personal dish is at the holidays during Christmas. I usually cook between Christmas and New Year's. I usually cook Chinese food,
Oh,
and I do a dungeon because dungeon is crabs in season in Northern California.
right.
So I do a very simple, but I do crab rangoon. And I use fresh Dungeness crab and fresh ginger and a little bit of sesame oil, a little bit of uh, sriracha, like I mean a little bit of spice, but not much. And I pair it with our Chenin Blanc Viognier from Pine Ridge. It's it's just a simple, and everyone loves it. And I do the Mayploy sweet chili dipping sauce for it, and it's like the biggest crowd pleaser ever. But I do, and there's a little bit of cream cheese in there and scallion, but like not a lot, mostly crab. And man, I could sell those things. I could probably retire if I could figure out how to sell more of those things.
It
But
sounds
if I don't make them, like there's a little rioting going on in my house. Like when are the crab rangoons coming? Like that's the thing. And then the other one that I make, which is actually a recipe that I got from a friend, which is a kind of a riff on a recipe out of the San Francisco Chronicle, is Sonoma duck breast that you take the Sonoma duck breast with skin on and you just score it, put it in a cold pan, let it sit there for, I don't know, I think it's like 25, 30 minutes on low, and like render out the fat so that you get the skin. And then you drain the fat off, flip it over, and you add in butter and Chinese five spice.
Ooh.
And then you baste the top of the skin with the butter and the Chinese five spice. Take the duck out so that it's medium rare to medium. Then you actually deglaze the pan with red wine and prunes. Seems weird. And you boil that down. And then and I add in a little bit of sesame oil and hoisin in that, which the recipe doesn't call for. And then I use my immersion blender and I kind of blend that up. And then I make either scallion pancakes or like those little bao. And I cut the duck up with a little bit of the sauce on there, and then some scallions and some cucumber. And then you have your little duck bao yum yum. And that I always serve with, it's almost a 99-year-old vineyard that we own at Sagacio called Mentafi. It's in the Santa Rosa Plains. And it's field blended. It's mostly Zinfandel. It's got a little bit of Alicante in there, which is kind of this crazy dark grape, but it's a big kind of, for Sagacio, we make pretty feminine zins. That's, I would say, one of our more rustic, just based on the style and the age of the vineyard. But that with Mentafi Zinfandel from Sagacio, or even the Sonoma Zinfandel that we make that's wildly available with like the blue tab on it. I ran it by our winemaker this morning. I said, hey, Andy, what do you think of this dish with this wine? And he's like, I've never had it, but it sounds delicious. I'm like, okay.
It sounds fantastic.
So
you're
those are kind of my gotta do once a year at least.
Yeah, that is fabulous. Well, Jen, I'm sure people are going to write into me saying, could you have her send me that recipe? We're going to put that recipe on the Share and Pair Sundays website. It sounds perfect. And I want to try it myself. I want to thank you, though, so much for talking with me today. I'm really, it's really been fun for me, and I've loved listening to your stories. So, and I want to say cheers with this chamois, which is delicious.
Cheers! I've got this. Yeah, cheers.
Oh, good. Okay.
Well, Karen, I want to thank you for your advocacy and for your not only the tenure of the time and your commitment. Like I've admired you from afar for so many years, and when I got the call that said that I got to be on this, I was so thrilled. Partly because this industry means so much to me. It's given, not only is it my career, but it's given me a life, an opportunity that never in my wildest imagination could I have ever thought for myself. And leaders and advocates like you, we need now more than ever. And if I can ever be of service to any cause that strikes your passion, please feel free to reach out. And I hope that people listening understand that that's the magic of what this community really can bring, a full, fulfilling life.
It certainly does. It is full of also generous and warm and good people. I second your thoughts too. I am so grateful to the wine industry for the rich life that it has given me as well. So, all right, my friend.
With that, take care.
Talk to you
Cheers.
soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.